Hello, everyone, and welcome to 3 Words, a bite-sized podcast about the simple and strategic choices that we all can make in order to become the best version of ourselves. My name is Dr. Michael Brown, and I am the host of 3 Words, and I'm here with a very outstanding young man, a common podcaster here on 3 Words, and he's also a dear friend of mine, none other than Russell Catania.
Hey, DMB, good to see you.
Russell, great to be here with you today. And today, actually, these 3 words were selected and initiated by you. Oftentimes I come up with the 3 words and say, who would like to speak about these 3 words with me? Not this time, Russell. You said to me, here are 3 words that I would like to interact with me about. What are those 3 words today?
Yeah, those 3 words today are change your mind. And I love deferring to you for the most part on these, these 3 words that we do, but this really spoke to me in the past couple of months. And so
tell me why.
Yeah, absolutely. If 2020 has shown me, one thing, it's that we live in a world that changes. And, change scares a ton of people. It's very intimidating, and we have a tendency to want to be complacent and stay stagnant where we are to avoid that. But, we talk so much about choices on this podcast. It's probably our central theme at the end of the day is our next choice and our strategic choices that we make to impact our lives. And every choice, leads to an action, but every choice starts with a thought.
Yes.
And when our actions are staying the same and we want them to change, we could change our choices, but to do that, we have to first change our thinking. We have to change our mind. We're somewhere that we need to leave from to adapt and think about things in a more complex manner. And that has been a challenge for me this year for sure, and an opportunity for growth. And I would love to just be, transparent about that and talk about it with you here in the time that we have.
I love it. And I think you said it well, that change is hard, that change is challenging. It can be scary, even terrifying. But particularly when we think about changing our mind, I think there's a tendency to think that if we do that on a regular basis, that there's something wrong with us.
Absolutely.
That we must have had it wrong. Or that those around me are going to think, wow, I used to think he had wisdom and insight, and clearly he doesn't. Clearly she doesn't, because they keep changing their minds. And I am becoming more and more convinced, particularly as we're in 2020 and facing multifaceted, complex societal issues, a global pandemic, that it is growth-minded to say, you know what, I might think differently about something today than I did in 2012 or in 2008, that actually it shows that I'm evolving, that I am continuing to become a better version of myself, because we're talking about that. You said choices. Why would I continue to focus on changing choices and making better choices each and every day of my life? But don't change your mind. Change choices, but don't change your belief system. It's interesting, Russell. I think so differently today at 51 than I did at 31. And I'm not ashamed to say that. I've actually changed my mind. I vote differently than I did 20 years ago. I think about social issues differently than I did 20 years ago. I think about marriage and parenting. I have obviously the father of 9 children. I think very differently about parenting than I did even 10 years ago. And I hope that those who know me well would say, wow, that's a good thing, that he's actually evolving, that he's actually changing his mind. And I don't know what's within our culture today where it's like the thing that I believed and the way that I thought at 15, it actually shows that I'm, amazing if I continue to feel and think the same way at 85 years old. It's perplexing to me.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, it is this aspect to me of feeling noble by holding on to those things that we've thought for so long, almost a sense of, just you feel
pride.
Obligated. Yeah. You feel obligated to hold on to those thoughts. It is absolutely a pride thing to admit that there is something that needs changing in your own thinking requires you to lay pride aside and admit that there's something wrong. And it can be a small thing. It can be a big thing. But I think the important time that we have on this podcast can be spent absolutely by acknowledging those things and then talking about just practically what I think are the 5 simple steps that we can take to begin changing our mind on specific issues.
I love it.
You absolutely brought up a major point by saying that we feel very intimidated to change our mind because we don't want people to think that we're flaking out on a former thought, that we're wishy-washy. We want to feel grounded. But the truth can ground us, right? And so to change your mind and to focus things in your attention that are true and honorable, to do that, we first have to be very strong and very courageous. That, in my mind, is the first step. And
I think also changing our perspective in that maturity presumes that we will change our minds.
Absolutely.
That growth presumes that we will think differently 10 years from now than we think today. That is maturity. And so I'm so glad we're having this conversation because I want to grow. I want to mature. I want to become the best version of myself. And so a mature person is someone who, when they have to encounter or have received new, reliable information that is true,
right,
they will change their minds, as opposed to rejecting that and only considering information that already aligns with what I already know to be true, right? And so I think this is a great conversation. You were talking about steps. You were talking about very specific practices. And as we kind of round out this podcast, I want to hear those.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, after step one of just being strong and courageous enough to say, I believe that there's an area for growth in my mind, right? You absolutely segue perfectly into the second point, which is seeking truth, right? And sometimes that truth is presented to us, but oftentimes if we're presented with information, we might have to seek the truth in it to really find out whether or not, we believe it or not. And when we find that information is true, or we seek out information that we do find to be true, well, you can't really change your mind unless you find the truths out there that you can begin orienting yourself to. So after being courageous enough to admit that there's a need for change, you have to go find the truth. And after that, you really, really have to start asking for help. Because this is not an individual journey. There are, thankfully, many more people who have the opinion that you're striving to obtain, right? The mindset that you're trying to change towards, someone already has that mindset. There are also a ton of people who are going to stay right where they are and think the way that you're still thinking. So you have to start orienting yourself to the people who have changed their mind or who have sought those truths out, and they are starting to orient themselves to those truths as well. So we need accountability from these people. We need encouragement, right?
Yeah.
And we need guidance, because it can be really discouraging to hang out with the old crowd thinking the way you were thinking before, and feeling wishy-washy and feeling like you've lost your pedestal on which you lay your foundation. So
I'm hearing even those first 3 points, this mixture and this combination of courage with humility.
Absolutely.
Because obviously to be brave enough to ask the questions, to seek truth, and then to ask for help, there is some courage there, because you've actually made a great point that I think is probably one of the biggest barriers to changing our mind is, will that affect the relationships that I'm currently in? And will it affect people's perception of me? Which, again, we don't mind that as much from a distance, but what if the very most important relationships of our life, if people think differently and they begin to change their mind? And if I can inject just a quick note, I was hearing someone basically talk about marriage as well, that so often we hear this idea that, you're not the person I married. We married 25 or 30 years ago, you're different now than you were then. And we typically speak about that in a negative way.
Right.
I would say it's a very positive thing. I like how there's actually a pastor, Judah Smith, who says, we've all changed. He and his wife have changed over and over again, and he keeps falling in love with the new person. There's something about the fact that if I'm going to continue to grow and evolve and become a better version of myself, we're going to look differently. We're going to think differently. We're going to respond differently. And that's a good thing. But it does require courage, and it does require humility to say that at this former point in my life, I didn't have all the answers. And even in this current point in my life, I still don't have all the answers. But for sure, I don't have the corner on ultimate reality.
Right. Absolutely. Courage, humility. And then number 4 in my mind is staying the course, right? We've made those initial changes. We've started to build a network of people that are around us who have a changed heart, right? Have a changed mind, and they're thinking more complexly about complex issues. They're not trivializing things that shouldn't be trivialized.
And we're seeing that happen in our culture.
Oh,
we're seeing
absolutely.
people just say, this isn't a big deal. Let's just downplay it. Let's just push it away. Let's ignore it. Let's distrust it. Let's discredit it.
Right. As you said, the social issues in our country, the public health issues in our country, right? There are trivialization of matters that are so deep and complex. Yeah. It can be tempting to revert, right? To go back to the simplicity of trivial thoughts, right? Yeah. And so to stay the course is to really continue to persist in the truth and fight the negative forces that are around us that want us to stay in place, right? Yeah. And not
rock the boat.
Rock the boat. I love that. It's like you just jumped in my mind for a second. Yeah.
Don't rock the boat.
Yeah. And the number 5 in my mind, and I think certainly the most important is to reflect. Some people do this every day, and some people do this every week, and some people do this multiple times in a day. But to change your mind is to change your actions, and to change your actions is really to change the way you live. It is to change your circumstances, and that is worthy of reflection. We have to look back and use our hindsight to see the wake that we've caused from the changing of our thoughts and the changing of our lives. And when we reflect, we often find our greatest encouragement. And when we change our minds into positive and truthful vessels, we really see positive changes in our lives and in the lives of people around us. And without reflection, without that hindsight, we can get lost in those discouraging moments where we feel wishy-washy. We can get lost in how hard it is to really seek truth. Yeah. How damaging to our pride it can be to ask for help from someone who's a lot wiser than us. We have to reflect, and we have to continue to encourage ourselves that we did a good thing. I did a good thing by changing the way I thought. And it will literally change your life because it changes your circumstances and it changes the way you act. And how you act is how you live.
Yeah. Russell, it's not just a good thing. It's a great thing.
Yeah.
Remind me how old you are again?
I'm 23.
I cannot imagine how my life would even be different today at 51 years old had I had the wisdom and the insight and the courage and the humility to be able to ask these hard questions. And even at your young age, when many people who are 23 are digging in their heels right now and are saying they have the corner on truth and that they know what is right and wrong, and they're not willing to give any credence to any opposing viewpoints. Thank you for modeling to all of us, even at 23, that we all have so far to go in becoming the better version of ourselves and being a positive force within our families and networks and, quite honestly, the nation and the world. But it needs to begin with this: the willingness to say on occasion, if not often, that I will and am open to changing my mind. For life coaching, consulting services, or to hire a keynote speaker, please visit dmbcoaching.com.